For more on passing the blame, let us now address the military implications of the purported and reported Bush plan. Joining us now, a Pentagon veteran from the Reagan administration, former Assistant Secretary of Defense Lawrence Korb, who is now a fellow at the Center for American Progress. As always, sir, thank you for some of your time tonight.
Nice to be with you.
If in 2006, this administration's mistake in Iraq was sacrificing security in the name of training Iraqi forces, why would sacrificing training now in the name of more security be any less disastrous?
No, it's any less disaster. In fact, General Casey is right. I mean, he says if you put more troops in there, this will increase the Iraqis' dependence on us, and it will prevent them from making the painful political compromises necessary to create an Iraq that people are willing to fight and die for. He's the one that's right. The president is the one that's wrong.
Could we in some way be missing some part of a cost-benefit analysis? Is there some fact that we don't know about here? Is there anything on the other side of the equation, any perceptible value in sending 20,000 more Americans into Iraq, especially if they're not designated as trainers for the Iraqis?
No value. You sent about 20,000 more troops into Iraq last fall, and what happened is your casualties went up. If you send another 20,000 troops, your casualties are going to go up. You're going to increase the Iraqis' dependence on us. And as General Casey pointed out in an interview with the New York Times, we're going to get blamed if things don't go right. You know, people talk about, well, we got to train the Iraqis more. Nonsense. The problem is motivation. We wanted 6 Iraqi battalions to go into Iraq. Only 2 showed up. It's not that they weren't trained. The fact is they weren't motivated because these political compromises weren't made.
And General Casey would seem to know something about blame. It's clear that he is against any plan to send more troops, extensively quoted to that effect. What happened to the idea that the president was taking his lead, the proverbial I'm listening to the generals on the ground? It appears that if he listens to them and the general happens to disagree with him, it's time to replace the general.
Very definitely. I mean, look what happened to General Shinseki, who told the country and the president before the war you could not hope to secure Iraq after the fall of Saddam Hussein without several 100,000 troops. The number was about 500,000. Well, they said he didn't know what he was talking about. Then when it suited them to not put in more troops, and field commanders after a while recognized that wouldn't work, well, then he would say, well, I'm going along with the military. Now that it's not working, he's going to look for scapegoats. The first one was Rumsfeld, and the second one, unfortunately, looks like General Casey. General Casey deserves a promotion. He should be made the Army Chief of Staff when General Schoonmaker steps down in a couple of months.
Well, of course, governments have been doing this to pessimistic but realistic generals since William Tecumseh Sherman, when he said the Civil War wasn't going to be over in 8 months. But a political aspect to this. The Republican Senator Chuck Hagel, who's also opposed to sending any more troops into Iraq, described the surge option before we knew about this sort of extended surge as Alice in Wonderland. Is there any sense that Republicans on the Hill, others, many, might try to steer out of this skid and abandon the president on this? Is there any way that the illogic of this policy would overcome the partisanship involved?
Well, I think it's not Senator Hagel. You got Senator Norm Coleman from Minnesota, who has just been in Iraq. He said it makes no sense. You heard what Senator Gordon Smith, the Republican from Oregon, said right before Christmas, that the policy not only was wrong, he said it was absurd and may even be criminal what we're doing, allowing these young men and young women to be killed and wounded day after day with no apparent long-term strategy.
Last point, the president was quoted by the New York Times as having told the Iraq Study Group about his insistence on using the word victory, which has apparently been used again today. The quote attributed to him, speaking to not the Times, but to the Iraq Study Group. It's a word, victory, the American people understand, and if I start to change it, it will look like I'm beginning to change my policy. What sort of snapshot does that give us as to what this policy actually is?
It doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you a thing. Victory is what General Casey says when the Iraqis make the painful political compromises necessary to create an Iraqi nation.
Lawrence Korb, Senior Fellow with the Center for American Progress. As always, sir, great thanks for your time tonight.
Nice to be with you again.
And ahead in this news hour, a special